Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hobby Homestead. We have now passed our average last frost date. I'm feeling pretty confident that we aren't going to get any more freezes. However, the long-term forecast does look like we have a bit of a chilly last half of May in store. It's either a little chilly or it's super duper hot, and sometimes it's both. I did decide to go ahead and plant my tomatoes last night or yesterday, even though we were going to go down to 5 degrees Celsius overnight. And I wanted to talk to you a bit about that because it is a hot topic. There are a lot of gardeners out there who will tell you, do not plant your tomatoes or your warm weather crops until after the May long weekend, or there'll be some arbitrary date that's just been passed down from generation to generation, and everybody just sticks with that. But there's a lot more to it than that. Also, my yard is kind of full of kids' toys because yesterday was beautiful weather, and so the kids were just playing like wild all day. And they may have gotten a little bit of sunstroke. They were super cranky by bedtime and then slept in this morning. This is just the best season with little kids. Just throw them outside, they just run wild, and then they sleep so well at night, dirty feet and all. Anyway, back to tomatoes and other warm weather crops. So with this tomato plant, I planted this a week ago maybe because it was just so huge and I had extras, and I always start extras and plant out early, knowing that if a freak snowfall kills my tomato plants, I've got backups. I've actually had snow on my tomato plants with frost protection over them. It was like a mid-May snowfall back in 2020, and everything survived and everything produced wonderfully. So I did a little bit of research after that happened, a little research into what's called chilling injury, and that is where plants or fruit get damaged by a certain degree of low temperature. And we often hear it as 10 degrees Celsius. Don't plant your warm weather crops outside if it's going to drop below 10 degrees Celsius, or they'll get chilling injury and then your garden is ruined. I feel like that's the vibe that people share when they talk about chilling injury or waiting until 10 degrees Celsius to plant things out. Now, from what I understand, and I've done quite a bit of reading on this now from different, scientific studies, not just internet blog posts, and there's chilling injury to seedlings, to the plants themselves. And then more commonly, I think the research done on chilling injury relates to the fruit that is stored when it's shipped to supermarkets. They want to keep things like tomatoes that are picked somewhat green in cold storage or cool storage to make them last extra long while they're getting to the grocery store. And so research has been done to find out what temperature you need to keep those fruit at before they start to get pitting in them, or they just fail to ripen fully, while also hitting just that right temperature to perfectly extend their shelf life as long as you can. So there's millions of dollars invested in things like tomatoes as a commodity, and so research follows the money. There's also some research on chilling injury of seedlings. So generally, tomatoes are fine down to 5 degrees Celsius. Peppers generally are fine down to 10 degrees Celsius. Very general. The amount of time that a plant stays at that temperature is more important, I think, than the occasional dip down to a low temperature, excluding frost, of course. If it freezes the plant, then these warm weather crops will just wilt and die. But if they don't freeze, you should be more concerned about the length of time that these plants stay cold. So for tomatoes, I think I remember it said 15 degrees Celsius for 2 weeks or more, you can get chilling injury. But then even if it drops to 5 degrees Celsius, as long as it's only once or twice, then it's okay. And of course, every plant is different. If you save seeds year after year from the plants that do best and produce earliest in your climate, then they're going to be better adapted to your climate. There are definitely tomato varieties out there that you can even grow in Alaska. There's one called Glacier that is specifically been bred for cooler climates, and it'll produce in colder weather. In gardening, there's never just a one size fits all. You have to look at all the variables, and you always have to try and experiment. So with my tomatoes, I am not worried if the forecast shows one night of nearing 5 degrees Celsius. If the nights are consistently 10 degrees Celsius, then wow, it's perfect timing to plant. But we don't get that until later in May. And that's probably where the May 2-4 weekend comes in as a guideline. But you never know, the weather can go like this. And so even in June, we can have cold nights. And you can't just be so afraid to put your plants out in the cold that you never get them in. Because then you're lucky if you get to harvest by August. And if you put them in earlier, if you start things really early, you can be harvesting in June. It's a big difference. That's like your whole summer worth of harvests. So I take chances. One thing that makes me feel a lot more comfortable taking chances is to use these. I don't like promoting plastic products. I understand that there's a huge plastic problem in the world. And so these things I've had for a decade or more, and I just keep using them, and they really do work. There are other things that you can use. I mean, you can put a row cover over them. You can put frost fabric. And of course, if you could do a plastic low tunnel, that's plastic, but it also will help them stay warmer during the day. But what I like about these is that they have these channels that you fill with water. And so that's how it stays up. The water supports it. All these channels have water in them. And as soon as the sun comes out, all the water in these channels warms up. And then it's a warm, cozy little greenhouse. And you can actually pinch these closed over the plants if you want extra warmth. You can leave them open on a hot day. And like these plants, this is blossoming right now. So they're not unhappy. They look pretty good, I think. And so I do put them in cozy coats for the first little bit. I also have some cozy coats over here for the rest of my tomatoes. And then once it's consistently warm enough to take these off of my tomatoes without worry that they're going to get chilly at night, then I transfer them over for my pepper plants. So like I mentioned before, peppers, their like average chilling injury temperature would be about 10 degrees Celsius. So if they're at 10 degrees Celsius for a prolonged period of time, it could do things like reduce yield. Honestly, I've always risked it, and I've always had just copious amounts of fruit coming on my peppers and my tomato plants. So I don't think I've experienced chilling injury in my tomatoes or my peppers yet. So it comes down to the plant, comes down to your microclimate, probably also comes down to the soil temperature. So a lot of people are concerned about the ambient temperature around the plant, like what temperature it is outside right now. But what's really important is the soil temperature. So roots are part of the plant, and they are maybe the most sensitive part of the plant. And so even if the ambient temperature is kind of cool, if your soil is warming up a lot during the day, holding on to that temperature, that's going to help you out. I also garden in raised beds, and they are these tall metal raised beds which actually warm up a lot faster in the spring. Raised beds warm soil earlier just because there's more surface area on the sides of the bed, so the sun hits it and warms it up. So I think for those reasons, I haven't experienced chilling injury. For those reasons, I always plant some of my vegetables out earlier than others probably would. I was going to say earlier than I should, but there is no shoulds in gardening. There is, what are you willing to try? These were just planted at the end of the day yesterday. They are perky and happy looking. Looking good, looking good. It's so nice and cozy in there, and the water's not even warmed up yet for the day. So if you have tomato plants that are just massive and gangly and you feel like they're not fitting in your grow lights anymore, and you're in a very similar climate to mine where you've passed your last frost date, but it's still a little chilly at night, or the risk of it being a little chilly is a real thing, you can definitely plant those tomatoes out and give them a little bit of protection, a little bit of warmth. Something like a frost fabric draped over them traps a lot of warmth, and it can really help to make those tomatoes happier and healthier early on in the season. Let's see how dirty this is. Can you even... Okay. And I don't think, in my 20 years almost of growing like this, growing in the suburbs with raised beds and some in-ground gardens, I have never had a loss. Even when we had that freak snow in mid-May, there was a lot of snow, and I took all of our extra bed sheets out of the house and I draped it over everything, and the snow lasted for 2 days, and it was fine. It was totally fine. We had peppers, we had squash, we had tomatoes. I don't know. I get that there's research done on this, but the research is not conducted in your backyard. It's just not. It's different. It's a whole different setting, a whole different can of worms, and large-scale commercial operations are different from your backyard. Even like in a backyard, you have fences often, and there are other things that make it different from growing in a big open space. So the climatic conditions are going to be different. It's funny. I have like a bit of a beef with academic research. I have a PhD. I'm published in peer-reviewed journals, and I left academia. I remember my advisor, who was amazing, wonderful guy, taught me so much. He was a real mentor. He was teaching me about publishing and how to get published. And it's very much like, what is a hot topic right now? Just like in the news, just like magazines publish things. What's a hot topic? How can you do research that follows the trends so that you can get published? You know, peer-reviewed journals are not looking to publish things that are replications. They're not looking to publish things that have already been done. They're not looking to publish old news. They're looking to publish things that are going to have a clickbaity title that people want to read. Like, I couldn't believe how much effort I was told to put into making a title that was like catchy for a peer-reviewed journal article. It was a little disheartening to me. And, you know, with my PhD dissertation, when I was told to try to publish it, even though I had no significant findings, it didn't work out. My experiments did not work out. And I was told, just like, tweak this, tweak that, try to make it something that you can still sell. And for that reason, I left academia. And I thought, I can do my own little trials that are relevant to my community. I love community-based research. That's why I'm an evaluator working in the community. And I love doing little trials in my own backyard. And I will never tell you, this is how it is. This is always going to work out this way. I did this little trial with 10 pots in my garden. And so now you know this is exactly what's going to happen for you. I will never do that. That is not the way it works. Circling back to chilling injury in tomatoes and peppers, there's some research out there that will give you numbers. Different studies will suggest different numbers. And again, it's based on like the duration that these plants stayed at this temperature, etc., etc. You know, take it with a grain of salt. Listen to the findings and then try something on your own and see what works for you. That is the best advice that I can give. All right, I have to pick some radishes and pickle them this morning, but I also wanted to just stop and admire beautiful blooms that are out on the fruit trees. This is just a 3-year-old apple tree now. It's called Frostbite. Over here is like the prized fruit tree this year, even more than the peach, I think. This we planted last year. It's an Asian pear. Like, we planted this as a stick in the ground last year, and it is so full of blossoms. I mean, we'll have to do some fruit thinning for sure, but I had heard that about Asian pears, that they were prolific producers, early producers, and the rumors appear to be true for me as well. So if you're looking for a fruit tree and you don't have a lot of patience waiting for it to grow and produce, maybe give this one a try. These are little baby broccolis, cauliflowers, kohlrabis, and beets. Still tiny, coming along. I think they've nicely adjusted now to being planted out. And the Virginia bluebells. Oh my gosh, I love these things. They are so beautiful. All right, we need to pick some radishes. Oh, radishes are really, really handy to plant in between other crops that are going to grow bigger, slower. So I have a row of carrots right behind them, and then I had spinach. Last year's overwintered spinach was on this side of them, and I just pulled the spinach last night because it was bolting, but I got another massive harvest off of it before then. You can eat radish greens, but I don't love them, so I feed them to the chickens. Or you could put them in the compost bin, and no waste. All right, harvest for the chickens. Harvest for us. We're going to take those inside. Hey, girlies. There you go, ladies. Welcome to my kitchen. I don't really do a lot of filming inside my kitchen, even though at least 50% of what I do as a suburban homesteader is in the kitchen. Of course, you grow all this food, you have to do something with it. I don't love my kitchen. It's not really conducive to filming in a lot of ways because, like, the camera has to point up against a wall, and, like, so do I. There isn't a great island situation going on, so it's a little bit awkward. But this year we're starting construction on our outdoor kitchen. It's going to be a multi-year process, so it'll be a while before it translates to, like, YouTube production value. But eventually I'll be able to be outside in the garden doing all of this, which will really make me want to film more food processing content, I think. But for now, I just wanted to show you what I plan to do with this bowl of radishes. First of all, When you harvest almost anything from the garden, particularly root vegetables and then also leafy greens, if you soak them in cold water as soon as you've harvested them, and it just makes sure that your vegetables stay nice and crisp. So I picked these about an hour ago actually, and then I had to come in and do some work. Now I'm getting back to them so they're nice and crisp, soaking in this container of water, and I'm going to make them into quick pickles. We love pickled radishes on salads, and I don't know, you can put them on like tacos and stuff. And also just as a snack, like we'll put them as a little side dish on the plate. The kids love them, so it's an easy vegetable. And while it's quick pickling, so you just mix up a brine on the stove and then you put them into jars and pour the brine over them, put them in your fridge, and then like a couple days later, a week later, you've got excellent pickles. You can these as well. I have canned some pickles. They still stay fairly crunchy because you can just water bath can them, so you don't have to like process them or boil them for very long, and that works really well. Join me while we quickly mix up some pickles, and I'm going to try to get a camera angle going that's not super weird. You can use any type of vinegar. I'm using half and half apple cider and white vinegar, 1 cup of vinegar, 1 cup of water, 2 or 2.5 tablespoons of sugar, and then 1 tablespoon salt. And I don't even have my pickling salt in my kitchen right now. It's packed away in the pantry downstairs. I'm not going to get it. Pickling salt just has no iodine in it, and table salt often does. Iodine can turn your pickled goods a little bit of a different color. You can use whatever salt. And then whatever like seasoning you want. You can easily get packages of like pickling seasoning, which is black peppercorns and I don't know, dill, whatever's in it. I'm going to just use some pink peppercorns, a little bit of mustard seed, and then I'm going to pack my jars with a little bit of fresh dill. It's so tiny still, but it's fresh. And then you're just going to bring it to a boil or a simmer for not very long, just as long as it takes for the salt and the sugar to dissolve. Garlic would also be a good addition, but we don't eat garlic. Kim doesn't eat garlic, so I'm not going to put them in there. Although, you know what? Does she really eat the pickled radishes? If it's mostly just me and the kids eating it, then maybe I will add it. But you can actually add your garlic like a clove, or in a jar like this, I'd do half a clove into the jar, and the flavors will impart. Now I'm going to cut out my radishes. All right, my radishes are chopped. My brine is dissolved. I'm going to add a bit of dill to each jar, and then add radishes. The more you can pack them in, the less brine that you end up using. This is the first pickle brine of the season, and it smells nostalgic in here. Right, there you have it. We've got 3 little half pints, well, maybe 2 half pints and then a quarter pint. And that's from 1 8-foot row of radishes. Also, always re-succession sowing your radishes, especially if you have nice, cool, temperate springs. You can get many, many, many harvests of radishes in before the heat of the summer sets in. Next, I'm going to move on to spinach. This is what I harvested last night from about half of my overwintered spinach right before I pulled it from the garden because it had gone to seed. We have about 3 lasagnas worth of spinach now in my freezer. That's how I measure my frozen spinach harvests, is in how many lasagnas I can make with what I've frozen. So I can make about 3 lasagnas this winter, piling them thick with spinach. And we've also eaten tons fresh in salads so far this spring. Now, I've had some requests to talk more about my spinach strategies. It's something that has resonated a lot with people. I think because spinach can be so tricky to grow, and I feel weird talking about growing inside my kitchen, so maybe I should go back outside. But just quickly, I'm going to say I sow my spinach in September, like September 1st, and then we harvest from it all fall, and then it gets covered in snow in the winter. And then it is the first spinach that comes back in the spring. And about the same time the snow melts and I start to see this emerge, I'm sowing the spring sowing of radish seeds. And so it's usually around like the end of March when the soil is just workable. Spinach seeds only require like 2 to 3 Celsius to germinate. So you can put them in the ground as soon as you can work the soil a little bit. They do take a while to germinate if the soil is very cold still. But what happens is that as soon as this stuff finishes its life cycle and is ready to go to seed, and in that time, all of those spring sowed spinach seeds are finally coming to fruition, and we are now harvesting fresh baby spinach that was sown this spring. So you pull out the falls, and then the spring stuff is ready to go. By June, we cannot grow spinach here anymore. It's pointless. You sow a seed, it germinates, goes to seed. So this is really something you have to do over the winter, very early spring, and then start the whole process up again in the fall. So I'm going to blanch this stuff very lightly, very quickly, like less than 30 seconds. And then I lay it out on a tea towel to dry, not dry all the way through, that would take forever, but just to get like the excess soppiness out of it from blanching it in boiling water. And then I put it in vacuum sealer bags and I vacuum seal it up, toss it in the freezer, and come back for it in the middle of winter. I hope that you learned something about tomatoes and peppers and when you can risk putting them outside. And maybe you learned something about following your heart instead of what the internet memes tell you. Make calculated risks and take extra measures to protect your warm-loving crops and see how much you can push the boundaries so that you can be harvesting earlier. Everything in gardening is a calculated risk, whether you profess to know all the rules or not. Everything is a calculated risk. Thanks for watching, everybody. I need to get back to work in the kitchen and then back to work at my computer, and I will catch up with you later. I hope that you'll come and grow with us.